Hi, I'm Nina Melendez, and welcome to LinkedIn News Live, where the business conversation begins with you. Today, we're talking about the future of flight. Commercial air travel hasn't really changed since the 70s, but one carrier is trying to modify that. United Airlines is buying 15 of Boeing Supersonic's Overture planes. They'll be the first large commercial aircraft to be net zero carbon and travel at twice the speed of today's fastest aircraft. That means New York to London in just 3.5 hours. Well, joining us today is none other than the CEO of United Airlines, Scott Kirby. Prior to his career at United Airlines, Scott was president of American Airlines and US Airways. He received his master's degree from George Washington University in operations research and his bachelor's degree from the United States Air Force Academy. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nina.
It's so glad to see you. I want to talk about this supersonic Boeing Overture planes. It's so exciting. Tell us what was behind that decision.
Well, at United, we've really tried to focus, particularly coming out of the pandemic, on innovating for customers and really trying to take the next step in aviation and make it something that customers can love and be proud of. And we've always known that flying is about saving time. And so we worked with Boeing Supersonic to help not only buy an airplane, but help design an airplane that'll work for customers, but importantly, that will also be the first airplane that's designed from the ground up with engines that are designed to run on 100% sustainable aviation fuel. And so it's an innovation for customers, it's leading edge on technology, and it will be good for the environment.
Speaking of good for the environment, I know you're very passionate about sustainability. How much of that was part of the decision?
Well, that was a necessary condition. When we first started talking to Boeing, said we're not even willing to have a discussion with you unless we're doing what's right for the environment. And as you can see, you're right, I am personally passionate about this, and I'm here in beautiful Beaver Creek, Colorado. And look, I can tell you, you can see the difference just in the last 6 or 7 years of what the climate is like here in Colorado. And this is something, perhaps we'll talk about it more today, but it is the defining issue for our generation to tackle and solve. We United are committed to that, and I personally am committed to doing that. And that's why we insisted on engines built for sustainable aviation fuel with Boeing.
So the last time there was this commercial supersonic flight was with Concorde, and that didn't, they were grounded in 2003. Has the technology advanced enough over the past couple decades to assuage any fears that anyone might have about being a part of this?
Yeah, the technology has advanced significantly. I mean, it's been 60 years since the Concorde was first built. And in particular, the engine technology is what has advanced significantly. The Boeing aircraft will have 2 engines. That compares to 4 engines on the Concorde. And the 4 engines on the Concorde also used what's called afterburner, which if you've ever seen a fighter jet, an F-16 or an F-35 flying, and it goes to, you see the engine turns orange at the back, they're dumping raw fuel into the exhaust of the engine to create extra thrust. And that burns much, much more fuel than these engines will burn. So they burn a fraction of the fuel, and there's half as many engines. That's what allows it to be environmentally and economically feasible.
Have you been in a supersonic jet before? In one of the
I have, although that was in Air Force planes. I've broken the speed of sound in Air Force aircraft.
What is it like? Give us just a little taste.
Well, the truth is you don't even know it unless you look down and see how fast you're going. You don't feel anything special when you break the speed of sound, but you know that it's cool when you break the speed of sound. At least when I was doing it, flying in an F4 or an F-16, you were getting to do other cool stuff like rolls and aileron loops and all kinds of other aerobatics. So the whole experience is phenomenal. To be able to break the speed of sound, and it's been amazing actually the number of customers that I've heard from asking how can I book the first flight, and sadly it's a few years away, so you can't book it yet, but it's indicative of the desire not just to save time flying from Newark to London or whatever the markets will be, but also to just have a unique experience on being able to break the sound barrier.
I want to ask you all about your AF experience in just a moment. We're going to get to that later in the show. I do want to say hi to some members who are joining us from all over the world. Zakaria from Bangladesh, Kyle from Texas, Lucy from Maryland, and Vicente from New York. If you have any questions, please ask. We are speaking with the CEO of United Airlines, Scott Kirby. ask any questions. We'll try and get those answered for you live on the stream. Scott, how much should I start saving now for the first ticket on Overture?
Well, the good news for this aircraft is, at least based on the current engineering, and because it burns a fraction of the fuel that the Concorde burned, we think that we can price this as probably an all business class airplane, but at sort of normal business class fares. And because it's an all business class airplane, we can be profitable much faster, much better for the customers, but at the kinds of pricing that you would pay if you were flying between New York and London today.
You also announced an order of about 270 new aircrafts. And this comes at a time when the International Air Transport Association said that carriers this year alone will lose $48 billion. What is making you so optimistic, Scott?
Yeah, so as we went through the crisis at United, if you rewound to March of last year, we were, by far, at the time, people called us pessimistic. I said all along that we were realistic. We thought the crisis was going to last a while and that air travel really wouldn't recover in full until the second half of 2021. But because we thought that, we always also believed that air travel would recover in full. And so what that allowed us to do is manage well going through the crisis, but also to be prepared now for the rebound. And we are incredibly confident in what the rebound is going to look like. We already see leisure travel over 100% recover. The human desire to get back out and connect with people and reunite with others is just overwhelming. And we're confident that business travel, while it's not going to recover immediately, and it's maybe different in some forms, is ultimately going to come back 100% as well. And so now was the right time to get ahead of that curve. And also United uniquely was the only large global carrier in the Western Hemisphere that didn't retire a bunch of aircraft, again, because we were confident in the recovery. But we're also now trying to take it to the next level. And this aircraft order is not just confidence in the recovery of air travel demand. This is about creating the best product for customers. Every single one of our narrow body aircraft, these aircraft, plus we're going to reconfigure all of our existing ones, is going to have seat back entertainment. It's going to have bins that are large enough for every single customer on the airplane to put a rollerboard in the overhead, fastest Wi-Fi, PowerPoint in every seat, Bluetooth connection to the seat back entertainment. They're really going to be the best airplanes in the sky.
I mean, I was so excited when I finally got to get onto a plane again. I had no idea how much I missed traveling. And personally, as someone based out of New York, I'm so happy that United now flies out of JFK. So thank you for that.
We're excited to be back. And you hit it on an important point. People don't realize until you start doing it again how much you missed and how much you miss when you're not there in person. It's great to get out and travel with the family and see and do things. But business meetings, to me, are far more productive now. And they go in a creative direction because all this lost time, as great as Zoom or Teams or any of these other video conferencing events have been as a substitute, they are no substitute for being there in person. And the value that you get, the serendipity of the conversation, the relationship building that happens when you're there in person, you realize even more once you start doing it, how much you missed it and frankly took it for granted before the ability to do it.
So we posted this conversation that was happening on LinkedIn News page, and we've got a lot of questions, so many of them centered around the pandemic. I want to bring up one from Alexandra. She asks, are there changes United has made during this pandemic that will likely remain longer term going forward?
Sorry, you stopped. Sorry about that.
The lawnmower in the background.
Yeah,
it's okay. It's live. It's live. We're ready.
Yeah, that's what happens when it's live. So are there changes that are going to permanently change?
Yeah, she says, any changes that you have made that will likely remain longer term going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. The experience for customers in particular is going to be different. It'll start with safety and health. All the things we've done to change safety and health and the priority that we put on that, much of that is going to last after the pandemic. We're not going to, of course, require masks forever. Once the FAA releases that order, that will likely change. But all of the cleaning protocols and the protocols we've used to have the air filtration on board airplanes, all of that will change. But more importantly, I think, or at least more obvious to customers, will be what the customer experience is like on board the airplane. And at United, as we went through the pandemic, one of the things we worked really hard to do was focus on the customer experience, communicating with customers, It's an airline, so there will be weather. Things will go wrong. How do we proactively communicate? How do we make it easier for customers in those situations to contact us? And we've got this thing called Agent on Demand, where you get an airport, you can just point at a QR code and you can video chat with an agent if there's something happening, instead of waiting in a long line if there's bad weather, for example. All the interiors on airplanes and just the way it interacts and feels, the policy changes we've made to get rid of change fees, the connection saver where we're holding airplanes every day for connecting customers. The experience is really going to be different. Our goal, I joke with our employees. My goal is to make our employees proud. Two things: make our employees proud and get our customers to like us. I joke, we're an airline. I aspire to love. I'll settle for like as step one. But that's really our goal, is to make to make it where your vacation doesn't start when you land, but starts when you get on the airplane, and you can feel good about that part of your journey.
Do you feel that United and you yourself are prepared for, God forbid, the next, COVID 2.0 or the next big health global crisis that's coming? Do you guys feel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's remarkable. Before the pandemic, we would always say the worst thing that's ever happened by far in the history of aviation was 9/11. And so our stress test, I never use the words worst case because there's always something worse. Our stress test was 2 times worse than 9/11. This financially has been 10 or more times worse than 9/11. But what it showed us is we had even more resilience. What all of our people did, our ability to work with unions, our ability to raise financing. Part of that was because of the federal response, a great bipartisan response, support from the previous administration, this administration. What that really did was give us a bridge till we could raise money in the private market, take all the steps we needed to get through the pandemic. And in the next few years, we're going to be focused on repairing our balance sheet and paying down some of that debt. But the fact that we got through the crisis, the fact that we can look out already today with such confidence on what the recovery is going to look like, gives us really strong confidence for the future that if we could get through this, we can get through anything.
And fingers crossed there will be no black swan event coming up
Hopefully
soon.
Not.
I have another great question from Kate Thomas. She writes, big events like the pandemic tend to force us to look at business and everything we do through a new lens. What will they, meaning United, want to be known for going forward? How will they differentiate themselves?
Well, that's a great question, Kate. And it's absolutely true. And I've been saying to our employees, the pandemic gave us the opportunity to make a decade's worth of change in a single year. And the biggest change that we've made, there's a lot we've done for efficiency and safety, health, and other things. But the biggest change we've made is the culture around customer service. And we had a 36-point improvement in NPS last year. And all the changes we've made to get rid of policies that interfered with our ability to deliver good customer service. 2 of the biggest ones being change fees, which we got rid of, and another one called connection saver, where we're willing to hold flights and wait for connecting customers. Many of you on this call that travel a lot have probably run through an airport and the airline was late getting you there, whatever airline it was. You get to the gate and the door is already closed and you can see the airplane there, and you say to the gate agent, please just let me on, and you're huffing and puffing and say, please just let me on the airplane, and they say it's too late, and you say, the airplane is right there, please let me on, and they won't. We've changed it. Yesterday, in a bad weather day, we saved 2,800 connections. Those kinds of changes, combined with what we're doing for the product, not only are about the hard product, those things are about changing the culture and empowering employees and convincing employees. When we tell them we want them to do the right thing for the customer, we really mean it. If you're a gate agent and spent your whole career being told by management to slam the door in a customer's face and not let them get on that airplane, and then the management team comes in and tells you, we want you to do the right thing for the customer, you think your management team, frankly, is full of, well, you know what? Because, frankly, the management team was full of you know what. You've got to walk the talk. And I think the customer experience is what is going to be different. And people are not going to recognize what it's like to fly in United Airlines compared to what it was in the past. We won't be perfect. I promise you, unfortunately, we will make mistakes. We are going to strive every day to get better. And every conversation we have is about how does this impact the customer.
Scott, I want to pause the conversation on this for just a moment because we've got a ton of questions coming in from the live stream about the Boom supersonic planes.
Okay,
We want to talk about that.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Norma asks, will supersonic planes be only for international travel or domestic travel as well?
Yeah, the supersonic aircraft will only be for international travel because of the supersonic boom. That's how the company, by the way, got its name. When I talked to their CEO Blake, I kind of joked with him. I said, "You're a great engineer, but you're not a great marketer yet." And he said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, you can't name this. It's an airplane. You can't name it Boom." And he kind of laughed and said, "Well, it's a supersonic boom, you know." And I said, "Well, I understand that, but it's still an airplane." I am joking about that, but because of the supersonic boom, we won't be able to fly over land. This is really all over the oceans.
And we've got one from Stephen who says, what does this mean for pilots? What do they need to learn to fly these planes?
Well, we'll give our pilots the opportunity, of course, when these planes are here to fly. It will be a new set of procedures. We've got the best, most professional pilots in the world. We have the best flight training center here in Colorado, and we'll have to work on the procedures for that. I'm certain it will require additional training, more training than they have today. But it will also be, I'm sure, our most senior pilots that get the opportunity to fly these aircraft.
You also announced recently, Scott, to create up to 25,000 unionized jobs at United in the next 5 years. So for people who are interested in joining your company, what do they need to know about your organization? Not just getting through the front door, but having a career like you've had, being able to rise up through the ranks and do well there. Any advice for these people?
Yeah, well, first, the 25,000 careers that we're creating, because what's unique about United Airlines, those 25,000 unionized jobs, those are pilots, but they're also mechanics, gate agents, ramp workers, flight attendants, and those are careers that we have people at United that once they hit the top of the seniority scale and have been here 12 years, have the opportunity to make 6-digit incomes with fantastic benefits. There's just not many jobs left like that in the U.S. economy. And that's why we think of them. They really are careers that people can get those jobs, support a family, raise their kids. And we're proud to create those kind of opportunities. For the kinds of jobs that are in management and that many of you on this call might be thinking about to be even to leadership positions, I think the most important skill is creativity. And when I say creativity, I don't mean artistic creativity. That's important for a lot of jobs. But I really mean being able to look at the world through a new lens and say, how can we do this better? How can we do this different? How can we do this more simply? And so much of what United has done during the pandemic, there's literally hundreds of things where we were either the first airline or the only airline to have done it. It's because we're creating this culture of entrepreneurship and a culture where it's okay to fail, a culture where we encourage people to try things. Don't create big PowerPoint decks. I've got a new rule that we just implemented at United, at least if people are presenting to me, no more than one slide, no big PowerPoint decks. Because having a good idea, being able to talk about the good idea, being able to synthesize it down to a simple story and then present it and then just move and go forward. That ability to look at the world and think about a creative way to do something new and different, to come up with entrepreneurial ideas. That's why we were the only airline, the launch partner for Boom. That was why we were the launch partner for electric aircraft. That's why we're doing things in sustainability that no other airline or almost no other company in the world is doing. And that is what is going to drive careers at United Airlines in the years to come.
How many more, when we're talking about sustainability and the fact that airplanes are just a huge source of CO2 emissions into the atmosphere, how many more of your fleet will start being reduced emissions? We know the supersonic plane.
Yeah. So, for aviation is like a lot of other industries, it's going to be hard to decarbonize. While we're investing in electric aircraft, for example, they don't have enough energy density to fly big aircraft with a lot of people long distances. And so there's a role to play for electric and even hydrogen airplanes, but they're not going to ultimately replace jet fuel that we need to fly big airplanes long distances. A lot of other industries like that. Steel is, 4 times as much carbon emissions, the steel industry, as aviation. Concrete, 4 times as much carbon emissions as aviation. Agriculture, 10 to 15 times as much impact on carbon as aviation. And there are a lot of industries like that. What's important is that we start finding ways to solve it and get to what we call 100% green at United. And we're doing a lot with sustainable aviation fuel. That's going to be a big part of our solution. We're more than half the world's commitment there, electric aircraft. But the most important message that I would leave everyone with is we are the only airline and one of the few companies in the world that has partnered for with carbon sequestration. We partnered with Occidental and 1.5 on the world's largest carbon sequestration project, which is taking carbon directly out of the atmosphere and permanently storing it underground. And we have to start doing that. Almost every company, I bet almost every company, the people that are listening today, if your company's made 100% net green commitment, you're using carbon offsets to do it. And carbon offsets are basically planting trees. The reality is most of the time, those are things that were going to happen anyway. There's no incremental impact. But even when they're not, mankind produces 4,000 times as many emissions as we did in the pre-industrial era. There's not room on the planet to plant 4,000 times as many trees. We're going to have to use carbon sequestration to solve the problem, or we will never solve it. And that's the biggest, if I could leave one message for people about climate change, not just aviation, we have to get on board with carbon sequestration.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that. I had no idea. Yeah. I want to pull up a question from Victor. This is a great question. He asks, will United Airlines seek to join space travel in its 20-year outlook?
We don't have it in our 20-year outlook. Space travel has got a lot more complications from a technology perspective, from a fuel burn perspective, and at least the technologies that are on the drawing board, I think are at the moment mostly, they're about space tourism as opposed to kind of realistic moving people from point A to point B. So that's a little, I think that's probably further than 20 years down the road, if ever.
Victor's very ambitious, clearly, for your company.
I mean, I would personally like to go to space, but I don't think it's to get from point A to point B.
Scott, I want to pivot a little bit and talk about you. You've had a very interesting career trajectory. You wanted to be a fighter pilot, and I'm curious why you changed career paths.
Yeah. So I just read Bomber Mafia by Malcolm Gladwell. It's a great book. But what he and I shared in common, I was kind of obsessed with World War II. I'd read every single book in my local library on World War II by the time I was a freshman in high school. And World War II was about air power, Battle of Britain and the war in the Pacific. And I decided by then that I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, be a fighter pilot, and become an astronaut. While at the academy, I did get to fly in fighter jets and break the speed of sound, but also got to realize that I was at best, sadly for me, an average pilot, which means I was not going to be flying fighter pilots if I went to pilot training when I graduated. And as much as I loved the Air Force, loved the military, and I got to have a fantastic, cool job at the Pentagon, I decided not to go to pilot training after I graduated and did go to the Pentagon. And then I wound up in aviation really by accident because you got my degree in operations research, which is basically math. I wanted to do something with math, and it came down to either going to an airline or going to Wall Street. And I'm kind of an outdoors guy, so I didn't really want to live in New York City and downtown, and so went to American Airlines, and the rest is history, I guess.
Well, we're certainly glad that it turned out the way it did.
It's been good for me. It's been fun.
People glorify this sort of run yourself into the ground kind of hustle mentality, and I was told that you get about 8 to 9 hours of sleep a night.
I do.
Why is that important to you?
Well, I think, I've done it my whole life. I think your mental acuity is so much better. You accomplish so much more. You make smart decisions. When you're tired, you don't make good decisions. If I'm tired, even if I'm at work, people at work know this, I'll say I'm tired and I go back to my office and I used to lay on the floor. They put a couch in my office because they thought that was unseemly. And I take a 20-minute nap because if your brain isn't 100%, I don't want to operate at less than 100%. And you need sleep to do that. And I think you operate faster, you're more productive, you get far more done. I sleep about 8.5 hours a night. I also, surprises people, I spend about 3 hours a day on average reading things that have nothing to do with work. I work out every day. I have 7 kids, so I have a robust family life with my kids. I have probably the best work-life balance, I suspect, of any CEO in the Fortune 500.
Speaking of those 7 kids, is there anything that you've learned about being a father to half a dozen children that you take with you in leading a Fortune 500 company and managing teams?
Yeah. I think actually one of the most important things for kids is always tell them how great they are and instill confidence in them. Confidence goes further than anything else in life. If you're confident, you're willing to take risks. If you're confident, you can handle setbacks. And, I always focus on telling my kids how great they are, applauding anything that they do well and celebrating that. And I try to do the same thing at work. There are times that you've got to say, this was a place where we fell down and didn't do good. But finding opportunities to be a cheerleader, especially the further you move in your career, you get so much more from people who will just run through walls from you when they know that you're genuinely thankful. It has to be genuine. You have to find things that are genuine and real to thank them for and to applaud them for. But that goes so far with kids and in a work environment.
And I imagine, especially during the pandemic, and leaders talk about empathy, and I imagine that has been extra valuable in this COVID times.
Yeah, I mean, as hard as the pandemic was, I feel bad about saying this. As hard as it was, and especially for an airline, you going through the pandemic, I told my wife on our anniversary, I wrote it in a card. I think it was the best year of my life. Spending time with my kids and the young kids, and we had a baby during the pandemic, so that was also awesome. But also, my older girls are in college, and they came and lived with us for several months with their friends, and I mean, it was just wonderful. And I, at least, I had the best work-life balance of just about anyone I know. But I am not going to spend as much time in a physical office and away from my family as I did before, because it brought home to me, even I, was missing out on opportunities, and that family time has been wonderful. And you can do everything at work and be committed to work and be 100% for work, and still have family time. You can do them both if you do it smartly, and life's a whole lot better that way.
Yeah, there certainly have been some very positive nuggets that have come out of this horrible situation. Congratulations on the baby, by the way.
Thank you.
Scott, I would love to keep speaking with you. Unfortunately, we have to leave it there. We truly enjoyed having you on the show. Thanks for joining LinkedIn News Live.
Thank you, Nina. It's been great. And thank you, everyone, for flying United.
That was Scott Kirby, CEO of United Airlines. And for everyone who joined the conversation, feel free to continue, or you can check out some of the other stories to the right of your screen. And of course, if you're on mobile, you can just click into the search box. Tomorrow, my colleague Andrew Seaman will be having his show at 11 instead of his usual noon. So that'll be 11 a.m. Eastern. That'll be for all of July through August. He'll be speaking with Caroline Senzia-Levine about differentiating yourself during your interview. You won't want to miss that. I'm Nina Melendez. Thank you so much for watching LinkedIn News Live.